Hi, welcome to True Spoken, presented to you by the Butler County Republican Party, produced by True Spoken Productions. Tonight we're going to have very popular office holder, Butler County Treasurer Nancy Nix, who's going to talk about an array of ideas and thoughts on several issues, and I think you're going to find it very interesting. Last week we had Sheriff Richard K. Jones, and again, thank you, Sheriff Jones, for showing us a lot of different sides of your personality, along with some really interesting issue ideas and thoughts. We've had a lot of great comments about that episode. You'll find it on our True Spoken channel. I hope you subscribe. And I think you're going to find that interview fascinating, as well as tonight's episode. I'm Joe Statzer. I'm the Executive Director of the Butler County Republican Party, and I'm looking forward to hosting this episode. In just a moment, we will have Butler County Treasurer Nancy Nix. And we are happily joined by Butler County Treasurer Nancy Nix. Hi, Nancy.
Hi, Joe.
We've been friends for a long time, and so it's good to have you on the show.
Thank you.
Very popular office holder here in Butler County, and so we're glad to talk to you about some of the things that the Butler County Treasurer does. But let's just start with that question. What does the Butler County Treasurer do?
Okay. Well, the Butler County Treasurer has three main jobs. The first is we are the property tax collector for Butler County real estate. We will bill out 160,000 parcels in 2021, collecting $565 million in real estate taxes. We are essentially a billing agency for that first job. 2/3 of what we collect goes to local school districts. 1/6 goes to social service agencies such as Children's Services, and the other 6 goes to local governments to help them run their township or their city, and also some goes to the county. That's the first job. The second job is we are the investment manager for all the department's funds across the county. Right now we have over $400 million invested in federal agency securities or with Star Ohio or in our local bank. Our priorities as being investment manager is safety. We want to watch all taxpayer dollars and make sure nothing happens to them. Liquidity, make sure we have enough money liquid and not heavily invested to where they cannot be reached if they are needed. And then third is return. Return is still very important because any interest revenue we receive on the funds goes to the general fund. And it becomes difficult when we're in such a low interest rate environment to get that return, but we're always trying to manage that to the best of our ability with our investment professionals. The third thing we do is we're the county's bank. So all departments in Butler County bring their pay-ins to the Butler County Treasurer's office, and we reconcile those payments with the auditor. The auditor is the chief financial officer, and the treasurer is the county's bank. So we have three main duties. We have 13 employees after a high of 26 employees. And so I feel like my position is to balance taxpayers' interest with the employees' interest and make sure that everybody's needs are met. And another big important part of our job as the real estate tax manager or real estate collector is to work with delinquent taxpayers, because when people get behind, it could result in foreclosure. So we also want to watch out for taxpayers who are having trouble, work with them and try to keep them in their homes.
Well, you know, I doubt if people knew how much the treasurer really does. So that's fascinating. And you have done a lot with less. Your staff has been trimmed. You've been a great steward of taxpayer money here in Butler County. So congratulations. How long have you been? Is it 14 years?
14 years this month.
Wow, it's went fast. Okay. So Nancy, you give a lot of speeches around the county at schools and agencies and clubs, and you're very learned on a lot of government policies and issues. One thing you've talked a lot about is the national debt and the impact on Americans. Can you kind of address that a little bit?
Well, it's difficult. I'm an accountant, and a lot of what we hear about the national debt, I believe, falls into economics. And so I see things through the lens of black and white, debits and credits. And for me, I run my office like I do my household. I try to avoid debt, and that's basically the way I was raised. So when I read in the paper that the national debt is now $85,000 per person, or it's $346,000 per person if you count the unfunded liabilities, I start to wince, because it's not just, it's babies, it's elderly, and there are only certain part of the population that is productive and working. So we are amassing so much debt. And when you look in hindsight over different presidential administrations, you can see from Lyndon Johnson to today how each president's, and I know the Congress carries or controls the purse strings, but each successive president seemed to increase the debt a percentage. And so if you go back to Lyndon Johnson, he increased it like 13%. But some of our worst offenders have been Reagan and Bush II and Obama. And yes, they all had 8 years. I think
Being
President
honest,
Trump,
Republicans and Democrats have done
that
this.
is
Absolutely.
correct. And it does matter, like I said, who controls the purse strings. But we do need to get it under control because basically I feel we are propping up our own lifestyles at the expense of our children and grandchildren. And right now, I think President Biden is just on a massive spending spree. He's growing government big, which makes people small. The bigger the government, the smaller the person. And so I do worry very much about our lifestyle going forward. I worry about our children. My husband and I have 6 between us. And I don't know how these young people are supposed to take the knowledge that they already owe $85,000 or $346,000 per person when they haven't even had a chance to make an income. And then with all this increased spending, you're seeing rapid inflation, which is basically a hidden tax, and any investments you have are going to be worth less. So I hate to be sky is falling, but it's really difficult for a CPA, someone who's, all my training is in finances, just to see such mountainous debt heaped on our young people for the future. And you also have to look at it over time, the national debt to GDP ratio, which keeps growing higher and higher and higher. And it depends what figures you're looking at. 20 years ago, it might have been at 50% debt to GDP. Then it goes to 100%, and now we're going to be up to 120%. And you're like, this can't really continue. And I don't know who thinks it can. Is it going to be next year or 10 years, 20 years? And eventually we hit the wall, and our lifestyles just decline. So yeah, I do worry about it a lot. I wish more people cared. I think people do care, but the fact that we don't elect politicians who run on the debt message means we probably don't care enough.
Right,
So.
and those are staggering statistics and a really good explanation of what we're dealing with. That's a great way to look at it. When the debt gets bigger, we become smaller. And we have to think about it. So we're going to have to change our lifestyles. We're going to have to change the way we look at politics. We're going to have to change leadership. And I mean, do you see it happening?
I really don't until we hit some sort of wall or have some cataclysmic event. I think there's a lot to learn about digital currency and regulation of that. I think we don't know what's going to happen. And we have so many people right now, I think with COVID, that they're sitting home instead of working, and we're borrowing from our children to pay people to sit at home. I don't get it. They've given all these local governments millions and millions, even Butler County, who we were debt free. And we're still getting $74 million. And that's almost a whole year's budget that the federal government is just sending our way. Just throwing it at the wall. And I think it's unconscionable. I think it's criminal, but I'm just one person. And
I'm glad you're talking about it, because I think maybe people realize it more when it's defined that way. So that's very helpful.
Well, we're just stealing from the future. That's basically the way it is.
Well, in another policy issue that you feel strongly about, you hosted or helped host a Vivek Ramaswamy, who is, I think, Ramaswamy. I'm sorry, I got that wrong. I think I got
Vivek Ramaswamy.
There it is. There. Last name, I was pretty good. The first name,
it's a tough name.
Yeah, sometimes. I just call him, Mr. Ramaswamy. Maybe that's easier for me.
There you go.
He's a conservative who is on Fox News, a contributor. You'll see him there a lot, and he's written a book called Woke Inc., which I think comes out in August. I have a little card here that you can see, that we're promoting, because it's an interesting book talking about big tech and social media and the impact, sometimes the negative impact it's having on Americans, especially our young Americans. Can you talk about that for a moment?
Oh yes, I really enjoyed having Vivek here. He's just a brilliant person, and I look forward to seeing his career. But we did that in May, and yes, his book does come out. He writes for the Wall Street Journal and National Review. But I've been worried about this issue for a long time, and it's not just big tech, it's social media, it's the media in general. Mostly I worry about the effects or impact of social media on young people who have been indoctrinated in schools, and then with the social media, and I see this in some of our own children. They're mostly conservative, but they receive these messages in school, college mainly, and then they get on Twitter, or mainly Twitter, and then they're in their echo chamber where they're being bombarded with these anti-American views or anti-Christian or what have you. That I think that is a real problem. I also think that the advent of the iPhone, you can see on a graph where, especially young girls, as of 2012, the suicide rates started, or at least attempted suicide rates started creeping up at the advent of the iPhone in 2012. I think that social media is not good for kids. I've been on Facebook for 12 years, and I'm so thankful it wasn't around or even iPhones weren't around when I was having children, because it's such an attention eater. And so I am so thankful that I was at least 40 years old by the time I started using social media, because they have made it so addictive. So there's so many parts to it that we need to wrestle with. It started with my kids, it was PlayStation and video games, and now it's evolved into a complete additional addiction. So that is a little concerning. I think it's also so polarizing, and Twitter is a complete cesspool. I'm very outspoken on Facebook because I'm just a very opinionated person, and I think it's part of my job too, as a county office holder.
Educational. Your posts are often very popular. Well, a lot of comment.
We're very tribal people, and as a conservative and as a Republican, I always want my team to win. So it makes me very. It gets me very opinionated. And have I lost friends? I've lost the dearest friends in the world. And it's so sad. But she thinks I'm a fascist, and I think she's a communist, and it's sad.
Right. It goes to that. It always goes to the labels. Yeah.
I grew up Democrat. Okay, we're Truman Democrats from Missouri. And I started voting Republican in 1996. And you know what it was? It was when I had a baby. It made me change my thoughts. So anyway, I think the media and the big tech and the censorship, I mean, what you saw happen with the November election with the Hunter Biden story, that was just the tip of the iceberg. And ever since, they squelched all that news in saying it was Russian misinformation, I mean, it was appalling. And it was just one thing after another, and they're on steroids now with censorship. I mean, they're censoring liberal professors trying to talk about ivermectin, a medicine, or it was the hydroxychloroquine, or it was the lab leak. And so when you have such censorship and suppression of news, and you're squelching the First Amendment, what happens? Well, you have conspiracy theories and misinformation. Nobody knows what to believe. Nobody knows the truth anymore. So I think it's a complete disaster. I mean, there's so much good that the technology brings to our lives.
Sure.
But I don't know if democracy and capitalism are going to be able to hang on when we're so polarized and we're throwing things at each other on social media all day long.
And people can hide behind their computers and say whatever they want to say. And I know you've put things out there, and people have gone on your site or on your Facebook post who aren't friends, who just come in from somewhere else, and you never see it coming, and then all of a sudden it gets. Like you said, it can get very polarizing.
Oh, yeah.
So, it's kind of like if you have Verizon or AT&T or Sprint or whatever you have, and they can listen to your phone calls and decide that, well, I don't like that, so we're cutting your service off for a month. It's the same thing. People don't want to see it that way. Social media has responsibility too. And I know that Vivek has mentioned that and talked about that in his speeches, and I know you've addressed that as well.
Right.
That's what we got to face.
yeah, this is terrifying, actually.
Well, it's funny because we have somewhat of a similar background. I also came from the Roosevelt Truman Democrats. I also started voting Republican in 1996.
Oh.
Here we are.
I didn't know that.
Same, very similar. Yeah, and I don't think we've ever talked about that one this year. So it's kind of a similar background. But you have an interesting background. You came from Missouri, the Show Me State, which I think fits you because you're very realistic. You're very out there. You want to talk about things realistically, and that's great. But your father was an office holder in Missouri. What kind of impact did that have on you?
Well, I try to think who was the politician first. Okay, so he ran for county office when I was a junior in high school. But I had already been on student council for years and years, since 7th grade.
So you influenced him, maybe.
I don't know who was a politician first. And actually, I don't think I'm a politician.
So you're just a natural. You just kind of
well, I actually think it's just my parents are very outgoing. We're people. We get energy being around others. So my dad was a county office holder for 24 years in a small county in Missouri, and he was the elections official and the chief financial officer. So it's a small county. He did both roles. So that was, I think, doing the parades and having the yard signs, and that was pretty exciting. Back then, they didn't have all the computers. So my dad was so meticulous with all his spreadsheets. I mean, he had every voter in the county targeted if they were a Catholic or where they worked or, their age group. He was before his time with campaigns.
So good to learn from, huh?
Yes. So that was an exciting thing. And I was always a class officer or student council. And so it's just part of my nature to be around people and talk about issues. And so, but Missouri, great place to grow up. I'm glad to be out here. I like Butler County. There's so much more to do than a small, my town was 3,000 people. Okay.
Sure.
So Butler County has been very big for me.
Well, good. All right. Well, with that background, it's some interesting things to find out. But you're usually one of the top 2 vote getters in every election. So people vote for Nancy Nix. Yeah, that sheriff gets you. Our guest last week gets you. And he mentioned that he enjoys being the top vote getter.
Okay.
But, people vote for you. They see your signs. They may see your picture. But they don't really know you. So a lot of people don't really know you, even though they see your post and everything. Tell us a couple of personal things, other than growing up in Missouri, about Nancy Nix that might be interesting to people.
Well, I'm so on Facebook. There's probably not a lot people don't.
Okay. Yeah, you've been out there. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yes. And I've been on so long. I would say I'm 110% female. I like everything girls like.
Okay.
Clothes and wine and chocolate and books and travel, and I'm very much that way. But I'm also about public service and politics. And so here's one thing you don't know. I fall asleep every night listening to a history book.
Really?
Oh, okay. Yeah. So I always have my iPhone and the ear pod in my ear, and it's usually Lyndon Johnson or Thomas Jefferson. It's Doris Kearns Goodwin of Lyndon Johnson, and then Meacham's Jefferson. Sure. And it's so funny because I'm an anxious person, high strung, and so every night I just look forward to. I'm like, is it going to be Thomas or is it going to be Lyndon?
That's what you're looking forward to. Okay, not nerdy. We're not going to say that. It's very informed. Let's go with that.
And Bob will tell you, I have it in all through the night, and I keep it really low. So, but if I wake up, I might be prone to anxiety or worrying about kids, because kids will make you worry, as you know.
I understand.
Or it could be politics, could be an election. So that always brings me just back to sleep.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And you are like that, because I'll get a text sometimes like, well, I haven't even thought of that, Nancy. You're kind of already ahead. But yeah, you're thinking all the time. But that's really fascinating that's in your... Do you think it's kind of an osmosis thing? Do you think you actually hear it in your sleep? Or do you remember something and you don't know where it came from?
Well, it's funny because I'll wake up, but I won't hear the book yet.
Okay.
So, and I keep it low, so I don't think I'm hurting my ear.
Right. No.
And I don't think I'm hurting my brain. It's just kind of okay.
And Bob's all good with it.
He's fine.
Hanging with Jefferson all night. That's okay. That's fine. Yes. So
I said I gotta get back to Thomas.
So there you go. Well, last thing, and I really appreciate this. You've been a lot of fun to have on the show. Can you think of a favorite event or two, maybe a memorable moment being Butler County Treasurer that you'd like to share with our constituents?
Well, I would say it's two-pronged. For the office, I think there's no real moment as being the Butler County Treasurer as far as the office, besides the pride and what we've been able to do with streamlining, using technology better, and I think being debt-free for the county. That was led out of the Commissioner's office, but being part of that team has been big. Now, if I think of moments, that would be more political. Being a delegate for the 2012 and 2016 Republican National Conventions.
Yes, you were.
I think those were just so exciting. Stuff I'll never forget. And then also there's those big campaigns we win, like Mary Swain.
Yep.
That was a big moment.
Sure.
So some of those campaigns where you really, really want to win, and it says it's
all
better.
Your energy's gone.
It's better than the Super Bowl.
Absolutely. It's the last day, and you're all just celebrating. It's fun. Yeah, been there with you on some of those.
And then also the Lincoln Day, when Mary and Lisa and I were co-chairs that Lincoln Day, and then the one where I got to introduce J.D. Vance. So those are just, I guess that's just me. I find all that very, very exciting.
Now, what was it when we did that? I worked with you on that. Lisa, our coroner, and Mary, our clerk of courts.
That's correct.
And you were treasurer. So how did that death? How did you guys say that was?
Death, jury duty, and taxes.
There it goes. Death, jury duty, and taxes. That's what hosted Lincoln Day. We had a lot of fun with that. So very good.
That's right.
I don't think people realize how much you do, and I think this has been a lot of fun and how impactful a local office holder can be. You've really talked about a lot of great issues, and I think it's been fascinating for us. So thank you so much for being on True Spoken.
I appreciate it.
It's been a great time.
You've been a great friend.
Okay, you too.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.